Oh, Scott, thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, it'll be a good conversation. Jeff, you set this up, so
yeah, this is
what's
exciting.
up?
So Scott is someone who has participated and is continuing to participate in like the higher levels of real estate agent associations. Just kidding, Scott. He likes the word realtor, and
Hey, you said it right.
we like to joke around with him because there is a difference, and people often are like, what is the difference? Why is there an association? What's the National Association of Realtors, and why is it important? What do they do, and why are there random ads on TVs that are sometimes funny and things like that with Modern Family Guy? So Scott reached out and said, hey, I've got some great information I want to share with you guys. And we were like, that would be amazing. It'd be super helpful for our audience to understand the differences. And maybe we actually start with kind of the back end. What's the kind of the history of the association and it being formed and the MLS? Like, just if you can kind of run us through, because this is interesting because everybody uses the MLS, but we don't really know where it came from and how it came to about.
Yeah, so kind of like we were talking earlier. Sorry, I hit the microphone there. NAR is the largest trade association in America, and what the Realtors are is we're basically a group of professionals that kind of want to take just being a real estate agent to another level.
Mm-hmm.
So, you could take your licensing exam, become a real estate agent, and go out and sell real estate, right? Hang your license with the broker, and you're good to go.
Right.
Being a realtor is kind of a level above that. You're joining for lack of a better term, a club, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But that group is basically saying, hey, here's the law. Here's bare minimum, what
Right.
you have to be as a real estate agent. Now, here's if you want to be a realtor, you will have to follow these ethics above that. Right. And so for the consumer, it really holds us to a higher level of service. And that when you're hiring a realtor, that you're getting somebody that is more knowledgeable, skillful, and going to have more integrity potentially than somebody who isn't being vetted through those filters.
Yeah. So, Scott, maybe this isn't the right way to look at it, but maybe there's 3 levels of association. There's the local Pismo Coast Association, of which you will be the president.
Correct.
Do we have to bow or curtsy starting in January?
I mean, if you choose to, I'm not going to.
You're not going to stop.
I'm not going to stop
Okay.
you.
It's a Scott's moment.
Good. So there's the Pismo in our area, Pismo Coast Association of Realtors.
Yeah.
And then you have CAR, which is California Association of Realtors,
Correct.
and you have NAR, which you mentioned, which is the National Association.
That's correct.
What are the differences between the 3 and the difference in roles, I guess, specifically, or what they're responsible for?
So the big parent entity is that NAR, the National Association of Realtors, right? And then they've kind of created that hierarchy to allow a little bit more control at the local level for the agents or the membership. So the National Association of Realtors primarily focuses on things at the federal level. We'll talk about later. Part of what NAR does, or the Realtors associations do, is advocate for property rights in different things for consumers that protect consumer property rights and interests, if that makes sense. And then moving back down to the state level, similar, it's just more at the state level, more nitty gritty. And then down to the local level, with things like conversations around, water rates, utilities, if the county wants to implement certain things like rent control, stuff like that, we're monitoring those things. And then we have the ability to take the state level power and bring it to the local level. So there's numerous examples of, local government entities kind of overstepping their boundaries, and the local association on its own or the local community on its own wouldn't necessarily have the ability or the knowledge base to fight against it. And we can pull those resources from the state or national level down to support us locally.
Do you have any examples that you could give where that has happened over the last few years, where a local association has done that to see positive change in the community?
Yeah. So I don't have one specifically for our area. I can say that very recently, the city of San Jose actually was putting in a policy that would require investment properties. Basically, owners of investment properties would have to register their property with a database with the city. And if those owners wanted to sell those properties, would have to notify the city ahead of time and give certain organizations the first right of refusal. And there was a lot to it that basically was real nitty gritty, but basically what would end up happening with that is it kind of it circumvents the open market.
Yeah, free
right?
market. Yeah.
Yeah. So now those investors wouldn't necessarily be able to get top dollar for their properties, and it would potentially reduce the amount of housing that's available because less people would want to buy investment properties.
Right.
And so we actually went in, the local association there went in and worked with the state association to come together and fight against that, and ultimately succeeded.
Well, that's awesome.
Cool.
Yeah. One side note here is Scott is when we log into our portal to do work as a real estate agent with forms and things, Scott's face, and he's sitting there on a chair, and so he's kind of like the face.
It's
of
glorious.
This,
Oh,
glorious,
yeah.
and it's statewide here, so
That
it's
was
pretty
fun,
cool. That was
yeah.
really cool.
I could go down to LA and sit in the fancy chair.
In the
and
fancy
take
chair.
pictures.
That's actually for all of our audience who are not gonna be able to see. It's one of those chairs they have in Men in Black.
Yeah.
Where it's like the awkward chair. Like, what do you do here?
Mm-hmm.
They have pictures that rotate through.
Yep.
So they made Scott sit there.
Okay, so he's like the leader of the free world.
He is the
basically.
leader, yeah.
So
Yeah.
of the free market,
So-
maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's
Defender of
interesting.
the free
So
market.
there is ways that we protect, personal property rights,
Right.
and a lot of times people don't see that.
Right.
And because we are part of that,
We pay
association,
fees,
lots of fees.
lots,
Yeah.
arguably.
So a real estate agent, to getting back to the earlier conversation.
Yeah.
And the history.
And the history. Those agents, I'm sure they can do a fantastic job, and yet they're not coming together as a group and defending the
Right.
consumer like we are. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
And so, yes, we pay dues. We actually have the opportunity to make donations beyond what we already pay as dues. And a lot of agents do that in order to go towards that. And it's not just that one example that I gave. It's
Right.
Prop 13 is something that came and is defended by the Realtors Association. That's along
Protect
with
people's
Howard
Property,
Jarvis.
right?
Yeah. There's numerous examples of things that so I sit on the investment housing committee for the board of realtors for the state.
Yeah.
And in those meetings, we go 3 times a year, and they go through all these state assembly bills and Senate bills that they propose. And they're just attacking personal property rights like crazy. And majority of those things aren't even making it through to the docket because we're shutting them down before they ever get there.
It's good.
The state board of realtors has so much power in their lobby that other lobbying organizations approach us to try to get us to sponsor their bills because they know that the realtors have so much power at the government level. So it's really cool to be a part of that. Like, you guys are a part of that. You guys are able to say, like, hey, my money is going towards this, and it's so powerful that other lobbying organizations are trying to get us to sponsor their bills.
That's cool. That's really cool.
Wow.
Okay, so tell us again, like, a little bit of the history of the formation of the National Association of Realtors. We've talked about the format, but like, where did it all come from?
So I want to say it was 1907, right around there, early 1900s. There was a lot of small local groups of realtors. And actually, I shouldn't say realtors because they weren't realtors yet, real estate agents that were operating, sharing information with each other. We talked about the MLS earlier.
Right.
And they would come to an agreement and say, hey, I've got these listings and you've got those listings and I've got these buyers and you've got those buyers. What if we share our information with each other, right? And they realize that creates a fantastic marketplace, particularly in the way that the U.S. is set up, right?
Right.
And so all of these different groups got together, and as things started to kind of go, communication nationwide started happening, these different local groups said, let's create a national organization. It was originally called the National It was a real estate exchange organization, I believe.
Okay.
And then they eventually rebranded it to the Realtor Association.
Right.
Different names in between. But essentially, they wanted to start creating like a standard of what a good agent is. Does that make sense?
Right.
And they wanted to start creating a standard of how data can be shared with each other. That's where the whole idea of creating the MLS came from, the multiple listing service, which is a huge for the consumer, a huge benefit to using a realtor.
Huge benefit.
We were talking before we started the recording. It's interesting. I have a friend who actually went and purchased a flat outside of the country. He studied abroad and was able to go, I believe he was in London, and he had to go buy a flat. And he was telling me his experience in trying to find and locate a property outside of the country. And he basically said the way that it works is you have to approach each individual brokerage and find out what they have available as inventory.
That's crazy.
Could you imagine doing that here?
No.
'Cause
People would lose their ish.
Yeah. What would happen to our market in general if you couldn't go, like now we have the internet and everything else, right? And yet what if each of those brokers didn't post their information on the internet? What if you had to go to them individually?
Try to be crazy.
Yeah.
You'd miss out on
So many
homes
transactions.
as
Yeah.
a buyer. You
Yeah.
wouldn't know what's out there.
You get less money as a seller.
Yeah. And how would appraisers determine the value of a property?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, tax records only.
Yeah.
It'd be crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they really saw this opportunity to create this unified database and make it so that as a group, we were serving the consumer in the best way possible. And they created standards around what that looked like and started launching it on a national level. Before the creation of that, it used to be, like we said, you went to the broker directly. What that also meant is dual agency was basically commonplace.
Right.
So there was no such thing as buyer agency in general.
Right.
So the commission conversations that are going on right now, I think a lot of people, if they understood the origins of how the co-op fee ended up becoming what it is, it would make more sense.
So let's just put a finer point on that. So you're saying before that, I as a buyer would go to a brokerage. Scott, you have a listing.
Mm-hmm.
And you're representing the seller in that case.
Correct.
But you would also be representing me as the buyer in that dual agency.
De facto, basically. Like if you came to me to buy that property, you don't have anybody representing you. You don't even, like, at that point in time, it didn't really even exist to have somebody else representing you. And so I was de facto dual agency. You would come to me, I would write the offer. I wouldn't even necessarily have at that point in time, if I wasn't a realtor, a responsibility to represent you fairly, because I have a responsibility to my seller.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Which is where the realtor organization, part of where they came into play was they didn't believe that was right. And they felt that there should be a representation for both sides of the transaction.
Yeah, it's really much healthier. Right.
It really is.
Yeah.
And so they created rules around dual agency so that there was a fair representation to both sides of the transaction, and created the opportunity for buyer representation as well.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. That's great. That's a great background. I didn't really know that.
Yeah, I didn't either. And so now we have this MLS,
Right.
which I think the consumer might think, well, why do we just use Zillow and all that? Well, where do you think the information gets pulled from?
Yeah.
The MLS.
Yeah. Where does Zillow get all of that? They get it from, and they're licensing it from us.
Right.
We as realtors, we own that data. So each individual broker that we work for, they own the data, and then via a contract choose to share that with the multiple listing service.
Mm-hmm.
So any broker at any point in time could withdraw their data from the MLS, and then Zillow wouldn't have that information anymore.
Interesting.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so the theme I'm kind of pulling out of this is the value. Where's the value, especially in these conversations that are happening with commission lawsuits and all that kind of stuff? What's the value of a brokerage? What's the value of a realtor? All those kinds of things. And you've hit on that, I think, a bit in what we do, but maybe we could just talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. Yeah, I think that basically being a realtor sets a baseline, right? So we know that when somebody joins the Realtor Association, they're required to be and agree to a specific ethics guidelines, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then we create an opportunity for them to continue their education. So we have several certifications that say, like, hey, would you like to specialize in being investment, like working with investment properties? There's a specialty for that. So now the consumer can go and look and say, hey, this is an agent that knows this particular channel of real estate.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because we know from being in the business, there's like so many avenues that real estate can take you down. You could be a commercial agent, residential, you could be a buyer specialist, a listing specialist. You could focus in international real estate. You can focus in investment properties. Like there's so many different channels, and we're kind of expected to be the jack of all trades, right? And this kind of takes that to the next level and says, hey, we can verify this person specializes and knows what they're talking about in these areas. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So I think that's an additional, when they're looking to hire a realtor, they can vet their realtor through that, and they know if they're a realtor, they have these trainings.
Yeah. And I think, and so Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, but like if you were to go work with most of the brokerages, just so people aren't, freaking out here, like, do I have an agent or do I have a realtor or what,
Yeah.
If you go to like Keller Williams, for sure, everybody's part of the association and getting the trainings and the things like this.
Yeah.
So Keller Williams is a big plus. Most of the big brokerage shops are part of the association and require the people to be. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, they're basically it's the broker's discretion.
Right.
So they can require it or not require it. But majority of them will require, you can verify it. Typically, all of us have it in our signatures and everything else, right? And you can ask, are you a realtor? And they have to tell you. They can't legally claim to be a realtor if not a member.
Right.
That being said, like I believe it was around 96% of all transactions in the United States used a realtor for the transaction, which is interesting.
Yeah, it's a good amount.
Yeah, and another statistic just to throw out there as far as value goes, putting a property on the MLS versus not putting it on the MLS at automatically 16% more than you would have gotten.
Wow.
Which is a significant
automatically 16%.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Statistically speaking, they can show that math over and over and over again.
Yeah, when I talk to a for sale by owner and they're like, I got so much money for my house. I'm like, well, I could have gotten you more.
Well, and yeah, the question is like, when they put that on Zillow, how can they be sure that they actually exposed it to all the potential buyers?
Yeah.
Like that's the question of the free market is we want to get it in front of as many people as possible.
Exposure.
And make it look as the best possible that we can. And how do you know you did that, got that exposure without actually putting it in the system that exposes it to everybody?
And we even see that not to bash on different brokers, but like some discount brokers, like a lot of times we see like, hey, these photos are horrible.
Yeah.
You get to the place and it looks way better. And you're like, man, they did no favors for this person, It's like there is value to working in professionals and like vetting out your professionals and making sure that the person you work with cares about your property being sold at the highest dollar and the terms that you want to get.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you could be leaving, quite a bit of money on the table.
Yep.
Scott, you've always been an advocate for the association here locally. You've done a great job. And, one of the things that I don't know if people understand about all of us is there's weekly meetings where there's trainings going on, live trainings. A lot of us get together. We get to really know each other, and we share a lot of information with each other. So, I've picked your brain several times. You've picked my brain several times. And, in some ways we really have grown a lot in this area. I would say especially we have a unique kind of ecosystem here where people are very open to share. Matter of fact, I was just today with another very professional agent and we were talking through some challenging stuff. And I think that goes a long way. And so you're going to be the president in 2024. And so you're going to be able to help bring in different professionals to speak to us as real estate agents. What are some of the things that you might be getting excited about for 2024 that, a sneak peek for us and I think our audience would be interested as well. Like what gets you excited about this next year as you're the president?
Oh man. So, I mean, the big conversation obviously in the real estate industry as a whole is what's going on with the commission conversations and everything else.
Right.
We're going to be focusing a lot on the buyer conversation, the buyer contracts and things like that. So that's actually a lot of probably what this next year is going to be for us.
Yeah.
I'm also excited about, just on a regular basis in bringing everybody together because our industry is changing. And I think it's important for us, instead of like fearing AI, fearing technology,
embrace it.
Embrace it. I truly believe that, AI is not going to replace realtors. Realtors that use the technology are going to replace those that don't.
Right. It's the same thing that happened with travel agents.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I think that as far as for the consumer, what that means is, when they're interviewing the realtors that they hire, talk to them about those things.
Yeah.
Like, how are you staying up to date in today's market? And how are you making sure that you're utilizing technology and the new tools that are available to serve the consumer, serve me, to help me get top dollar for my property, to help me get the property that I want for my family, things like that.
I was just having this conversation with somebody, and it was great to be able to mention this podcast actually, because not only do I learn a ton sitting in the chair, I mean, it's exposure. We've got, we've got buyers and sellers and clients who, we have access to, like you said, and this is a great platform for that. But we were also in a training where another agent said something very similar. Like, I think if you don't use technology well, you just won't be around in a few years.
Yeah.
And so it's really exciting, actually. Like, I know we embrace it. And it's really fun to see like what could be coming down the pipe with technology and all that. So,
well, and I think AI, it's like people are like, well, what does that mean in the real estate industry? It's like, well, it's like there's things that you can take a day to do yourself, or you can have AI do, in a matter of minutes. And so there's things like that, or maybe it's exaggeration, maybe it takes an hour, right? And you use and utilize these tools. Same thing with virtual assistants and all this. I mean, like, you kind of have to embrace it. Going back to the conversation about commissions. So I love this. I love talking about commissions, something I've never strayed away from. I've always wanted to talk to my clients openly about it. And it's like, I bring so much value in what we do, and our team brings so much value. And, and that's always been very easy to communicate to listings, to sellers. And so now it's like, okay, hey, how do we bring value to buyers? And so it's like, now we need to think about the value add that we present in our last 5 transactions, and how do we do that, and then be able to articulate and communicate that. For example, it's like, hey, we look at properties a little differently, and how you can maximize and utilize these. We know how to talk to a listing agent and present terms that are favorable for the seller, but get you the terms that you want in a way that's a win-win, where a lot of people don't have those skill sets. We practice our conversations so that we're very honed in how we do it.
Right.
It's like literally we'll role play, which people are like, you role play? Yeah, we'll role play how to negotiate the request for repairs so that you walk away with the terms that you want as a buyer,
right?
And you want these things to be fixed. So I think people don't maybe necessarily always understand that, but once as an industry we communicate, the value that we bring, then like people are really worried about the commissions for buyers right now. Just it's out there. People are very worried about it, and I get that. But I don't know of any valuable real estate agent that's going to go do it for free,
right?
Or even $1,000 or a few $1,000. There's no flat fee agents that have the network, that have the understanding, that know what to look out for in a home inspection. They just don't exist.
Yeah, I think the conversation around the buyer commissions, from my perspective, is about transparency with the public. Like, that's the primary concern.
And why not be transparent?
Right. And so what's happened is a small group of agents that haven't been able to effectively communicate their value have created a problem for the rest of us.
Yeah.
In
Kentucky, whatever.
Or wherever, yeah. I think
Kansas,
California has done a good job with their contract of making that part of things transparent with the
way you read
consumer.
it. Yeah.
And what's going to end up happening in the future, I think, is you're going to see more buyer broker agreements, contracts between the buyer broker.
My buyers sign them now.
Yeah, and I guess for this, it's important, since we're addressing the consumer, is just keep an eye out for that. Like, I have had consumers before say, hey, like people in other areas, I refer them to an agent and they say, hey, they asked me to sign a contract with them. Is that normal? And in our area, it hasn't been as common, but it's becoming more common now. LA, San Francisco, it was commonplace.
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of a localized tradition kind of thing.
Yeah.
In our area, it's going to be more and more common. So just as a consumer, be aware that A, make sure you're working with a legitimate professional, and B, know that you might be asked to sign something like that moving forward.
Can you explain what that agreement says?
Yeah. So, and there are potential revisions coming, but essentially what the contract's going to say is that you as a consumer are hiring, what I like to equate it to. It's a listing agreement for a buyer. Right. It's a buyer listing agreement. It's if you were to sell a house, you would sign a contract with a listing agent saying that you agree to pay the listing broker X dollar amount. So now you're just on the buyer side saying that if you would like to engage this person for their services, you agree that they will get paid X dollar or X percentage or X dollar amount. Now in the future, you could theoretically negotiate that the seller agrees to pay that commission for you as a part of the contract. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah. But let's be more clear. So there's the buyer's agent typically gets paid X percentage.
Right.
Okay.
From the proceeds typically of
typically
from the seller.
Proceeds of the sale of the home.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that could continue.
Mm-hmm.
It could be that it's negotiated and the buyer pays X percent of the total, correct?
Yeah, I mean, the commission is always negotiable.
Right.
And so there's a lot of scenarios that could play out. And there's a potential that if a buyer, let's say you're a buyer and you agree to pay me, say, 3%, right? And the listing agent is offering 2%. So if you sign that agreement, you would be responsible for that 1% difference.
Mm-hmm.
You could theoretically write in your offer that the seller agrees to pay the 1% difference, and if they agree to pay that, they would pay the full amount. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's just one scenario that could play out. And moving forward, part of what all the lawsuits are about are around transparency of that commission. Like that's why in Zillow now or any of the online portals, you can go and see what the listing agent is offering the co-op fee as. Because that ends up affecting the bottom line of the seller's net proceeds, which affects what they're willing to sell the property at.
Exactly. Yeah. And transparency this is good.
Right.
This is all good stuff.
Yeah, why not?
So, I mean, it's not like
it makes us hone our skills of communicating our value.
Yeah, I mean, this is nothing we haven't been doing already too. So it's no skin off our back.
Agreed. Yeah, I think the majority of agents will have no problem having a conversation and saying, here's what I do for you, here's what I charge for that.
Yeah, and for sellers who have a listing agreement with an agent, they've agreed to X percent commission, and they think the value's there. I don't see why it's going to be any different on the buyer side. Yeah. It's just a matter of like, who's going to pay, how's it going to get.
So my experience in the past, I've been a coach and involved in training with our brokerage and everything else. That block comes from the agent, not from the consumer.
Totally.
So the consumer, when presented the option and explained clearly what the value is, has no problem with hiring an agent. The agent is the one who says, I don't feel comfortable having this conversation.
Okay.
Because a lot of agents are like people pleasers and they feel like it's going to be offensive or something. And so that's just mental block. I don't even know how to have this conversation right
100%. Now. Yeah. They're afraid to have the conversation especially because we have a lot of agents when they first start focus more on working with buyers than sellers. Yeah. So they're the bulk of who's working with the buyers, which means they're not going to be as skilled in having that conversation. And so it's just commonplace for agents to not want to have that conversation.
It's interesting though, because people have this all the time. You hire somebody to paint your home, you get a couple of bids, you see who you vibe with, who's got the best value for all that kind of stuff. And then you make a decision. Yeah. This happens all the time.
If you guarantee that I only have to do one showing and
stop.
Right, terms in there.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Thanks for clarifying that, Scott. And I mean, it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in 2024. But again, it's all good stuff. Transparency is really good. It's
really good. Dude, Scott, we got some magical, I don't know, is this that time?
Oh, we can, anything else you want to cover before we get to know you a little bit better?
I think that's it. I don't know. I think
magical
we're good.
Time.
Okay.
I'm excited about magic. So.
Magic. Yeah, don't get too. He overhyped it for sure.
I don't know.
We got 4 questions for you.
People can see how good looking he is now.
Yeah,
that we
exactly.
have this on YouTube.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So 4 questions. The first is favorite movie, book, or TV show.
Gosh. Okay, so
can I guess based on your tie?
Oh, you know what? That's misleading.
Oh, see.
But
oh, never mind. Don't
False
guess.
marketing. Okay. What do you have on your tie, by the way? Just so people.
So I got some stormtroopers here.
Okay.
So I do love Star Wars. Okay. I'm not like a Star Wars nerd by any means. My son is though, and so he's very proud of this tie.
That's amazing.
So
yeah, you're his hero.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
That's
like
awesome.
when you have kids, you automatically have people that like
look up to you.
Just look up to you no matter what.
That'll go away. Yeah. I've got a 16-year-old.
Oh, he's 12. He's almost there.
Okay. Okay, so sorry, I interrupted. Favorite book, movie, or TV show?
Oh man. Okay, so you gave me a heads up on this earlier, and I am horrible about picking one thing.
Choose. You can do 2.
I can do 2.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Oh man, I'm on the spot. Okay. Dang it. My brain just went dead. And I can't think of
Can't do it.
anything.
Can't do it, huh?
What was the most recent book, movie, or TV show you watched or read? How about that?
Okay.
Start there.
That's
Get
a
the
good
wheels
one.
turning.
Well, so it's funny you say that because I was going towards like a Gladiator or Highlander
Okay.
or like
Yeah.
something like that. And last night I watched Napoleon.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
That's
I really
pretty
like
intense.
those like history. Like, cause
Yeah.
I'm like a lifelong student. So everything I watch or anything like that, I always take from like a educational standpoint.
Yeah.
Can I do my favorite podcast
Yeah.
I mean,
aside from
don't.
this one,
Yeah. Okay. I was
obviously?
say don't
Yeah,
embarrass
yeah.
us, but
Please embarrass us.
Okay, favorite podcast, Business Wars.
Okay.
Are you
Business Wars.
familiar with
No,
Business
no.
Wars?
Check it
I
out.
Need to be.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I listen to it. My kids, I got my
Okay.
kids
What
hooked
is it?
into
Tell me.
This is
Give
gonna be
me
good.
the.
So the premise is essentially they like dig deep into historical business competitions. So
Okay.
they did one that's like Southwest Airlines versus American Airlines.
Oh, I love this.
Hearst versus Pulitzer.
It's good.
Sony versus Microsoft, like the video game console
Yeah.
wars, like all of these different, and there'll be like 4 or 5 episodes where they kind of like, I mean, a little bit of it is like they kind of make a little bit up in between, you know what I mean? But they like narrate it and they have different people do voice acting,
Mhm.
and it just makes it really exciting.
Nice.
And there's really cool lessons to learn from it because you get to see how like these CEOs tackle problems and things like that too.
Yeah, we
I
found
love
out
it.
that we had a spy on join our team. We had to like, oh, you were a spy for a different real estate company, trying to figure out how we got so good. It's not gonna.
Jeez. So, well, we might actually need to add podcasts to that question.
That's a good one. Yeah, we should have
Okay.
podcasts.
Okay. Question number 2: who's the most influential person in your life?
Man, okay, so when you told me this one, I was thinking like different categories because so like my wife is obviously like day to day, she's my partner.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
like everything. I feel like that's a cop out though because that's like so obvious.
Mhm.
But
You
it's
know what I mean?
important to mention.
Important. Yeah. Now you're not in trouble. Okay,
Yeah.
next.
I mean, and then if I go into like, so for the last like 10, 11 years, I've been working out with this group of guys.
Yeah.
And, I talk
Yes.
about them all the time. And I'd say like everybody in that group, our the guy that put the group together, his name's David Pitts. He's going to actually probably laugh if I talk about this on here. But I would say like they've had the biggest impact because they've helped me take my mindset like beyond. I've always been very like self-limiting. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so they probably have shown me like my abilities are
Wow.
beyond what I actually
Dude, I
limit
love that.
myself at.
That's a good crew to have.
That's a
right
good
there.
crew.
Okay. Do
There's
you remember
another-
question number 3? You want me to ask?
No, hey, so this is one of our favorite questions. Describe to us your most idyllic, perfect, just amazing day here on the Central Coast.
Oh gosh.
And food. You like food.
Yeah, you can. You got food.
So I secure like 10 listings in one day.
Ooh,
Sick.
Okay.
Um,
Great.
All right.
Woo! That's off to a good start.
And
then
that's it.
and then
By
I
9
go to
o'clock.
bed.
And then I close another 10 listings that same day.
Yeah.
Okay, but non-business related. Okay. No, okay. So I love hiking. So I'd probably
Right.
go check out some of our beautiful coastline
Yep.
hikes that we have. They're gorgeous. And then I would probably, after that, go have some dinner. I love Happy.
Oh, yeah,
They're,
dude.
like
Happy's
Right
great.
across from
fantastic.
here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're great. So that's like one of my favorite places. Went there for my birthday dinner.
It's a fantastic place.
So they're great. And then, and then probably go check out one of our beautiful sunsets
Nice.
and go do that. And then, I don't know, maybe go to the drive-in theater for the
Dang, that's a good day.
That's a good day.
10. He made like 100K or more, and he secured 10. So it's like another 100K.
Yeah.
I just funded my entire
Like
Yeah.
your whole life.
Yeah.
Just funded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing day, Scott. Well done. Congratulations.
Well, I mean, there was no limits on.
no, that's
No
true.
limits.
Hey,
Yeah.
yeah, that's true.
Within reason. That could happen. That
Yeah.
could happen.
Okay. Question number 4: how do people get in touch with you?
Oh.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
You wear multiple hats, so I guess
I
which hat would
do.
you like to promote?
Yeah, I mean, should I just put my cell phone out there in the
Sure.
You
in
can,
the
Yeah. There's about
universe?
a million people listening. So
I
Maybe
love it.
maybe 900,000.
900. Yeah.
900,000.
As long as you feel
Okay.
comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you can visit me at. I'm trying to think what website I'm putting out there. Well, my phone number is 805-710-3168, or you can check out online at scott.slowhappyhomes.com. SLO happyhomes.com.
I thought it was Scott at scottsastud.com, but
He owns that domain. But
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I went through, and anything that says Scott in it, I bought.
You bought,
So,
okay.
Yeah.
man, Scott,
Scott, Stud, any combination of that, he
Scott
owns it all.
toilet paper.
Oh, nice.
Dude, we have loved having you on today.
Yeah.
Way to enlighten us even a bit about the association we're in, and we appreciate locally what Pismo Coast does, and it's fantastic to see you rising to the top, and you're obviously important as I think your peers have a big part to say in you getting that position. So
yeah,
we're excited for you.
congratulations,
Congratulations,
Mr. President.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
I
for being
appreciate
here.
you guys having me.
Of course.
It's been a pleasure.